25. The wind rattled my windows, and I cursed this New York weather. I rolled over in the bed and sat up. I shook my head to shake off the fuzziness. I'd been in New York for over a week now, and ever since I had gotten in touch with Janet, it had been one merry-go-round. I lit up a cigarette and thought about her. She was playing one of the most expensive nightclubs in the city now, and some of the people I had met through her had really been big stuff. I grinned to myself as I remembered the way she always introduced me, Mr. W.S. Jones. She was afraid to tell them my first name, but that was understandable. In the circle of white people she moved in, my name would really start some gossip. Even so, I could see some of the more experienced men staring at me closely at times. I knew that they were trying to figure out just what the hell the deal was with me. I smiled. Just the thought of the 25 grand I had put in the bank made me feel legitimate as hell. The phone rang suddenly. "Hi, honey. Are you awake yet?" Her sweet laughter came tingling along the line.
"Hell no. I'm dreaming that Janet just called me and wanted to know if she could come up to my apartment and wake me up properly."
"Whoreson, dear, I really do wish I could come up, but I know that once you get me in that apartment, you never will behave yourself. So I think I'll take a few precautions, like having you meet me uptown for lunch. Can you make it?"
"Depends on what time you're having lunch,"
I replied, glancing at my watch. "Since it's after 2 o'clock now, wouldn't it have been better just to say supper?" Her rich laughter came through the phone again. I was beginning to really enjoy myself with her. Janet was the first woman I had ever dated without having it in the back of my mind to beat her out of something. Since I'd reached her after arriving in New York, I had experienced some truly shocking changes in my life. I didn't have to worry about any phone calls in the middle of the night telling me my woman was in jail or the hospital, so I had begun to relax. For the past few days, I've been wondering more and more what I could invest my money in. Something legitimate for a change. Say in about half an hour, honey? Wouldn't that give you enough time to get up and get ready?" she asked sweetly.
"More than enough, Janet."
I hesitated briefly. "Listen, sugar, can't we go somewhere besides those expensive places you like to go to?" "No, it isn't the money I'm worried about," I said quickly, cutting off her question. "I just don't feel comfortable when I'm sitting in Sardi's." That was really an understatement. When I went to places like that with her, I felt like a lackey. I felt everyone could look through me and see I didn't belong. "I'll tell you what, Whoreson, I'll meet you in the lobby of your hotel in half an hour. Then you can choose wherever you like."
"Honey," I said, trying one more time, "if you're coming this far, you might as well come upstairs and help me dress."
"Don't forget, half an hour," she said, and hung up, not even bothering to answer my question. Again I wondered if it could be possible for Janet to be a virgin.
I would have known if she was fucking when we grew up. There had never been any wire out on her making it with anyone. But you never could tell about those things. Since she was in show business, I couldn't imagine all the men she came in contact with not being able to get her pants off. No. Someone, somewhere, had to have copped. I'd find out in the near future, I promised myself. I took a quick shower and dressed carefully, putting on a sky-blue silk suit with dark blue matching suede shoes. It was chilly out, so I draped my fall coat over the arm of a chair while I lit up a joint. I had just about finished smoking it when she called from the lobby. I didn't even bother to try to get her to come upstairs. Everything would come to the man with patience. I grabbed my coat and hurried down to the lobby. She was standing against the desk when I got there. She was still thin, with large, lovely eyes. I looked at her with affection. 2 young ladies, sitting in the lobby, stared at her openly. I believe they recognized her, but hadn't made up their minds if it was Janet or not. I rushed her out of the hotel and into my car. I removed the ticket from off of the windshield. "If I don't start paying these goddamn things soon,"
I said as we got in the car, "I'll have enough of them to start a collection." She turned to me and smiled. "I know you don't like to eat at some of the places I go, Whoreson, but I've gotten an appointment with some people at Harry's Supper Lounge."
I couldn't keep the irritation out of my voice. I guess it doesn't make too much difference, Janet.
Honey, I didn't mean for this to happen, but before I left my place they called, and since it was important, I decided to have them meet us. She continued to explain. One of the men we're meeting happens to own a booking agency, so I thought you might want to meet him. She added quickly, You know, these are the kind of people you're going to have to know, Whoreson, if you want to make it at any part of show business. For a while I remained silent, thinking over what she had said.
You know, all I'm really thinking about opening is a small record company, Janet. To these people you talk to, that's small peanuts. I hate to give them the impression you're wasting your time with someone who's still on the ground floor.
Once again I was filled with that feeling of insecurity. I wondered if I was that far out of my depth. She reached over and clutched my arm, reassuringly. Don't worry about it, honey. They're nothing but flesh and bones. You came out of the slums, Whoreson. Here you are, not even 25 yet, with money in the bank. Why, all you have to do is pick out a field you like, and you're young enough to learn by your mistakes. By the time you reach 30, you'll have a full knowledge of what you're doing. She smiled at me and continued, Most of the people you'll meet will be men and women just like yourself. People who wouldn't believe that all life had to offer them was a small-paying job in someone else's office or plant. They had ambition and confidence in themselves. That's why they're where they're at today. A doorman opened the car door for us when I pulled up in front of the place. My knees trembled slightly. It was another world to me, but I knew I was buying chips in the game, and I planned on playing my hand to a T. I got out, and we walked inside the club. The head waiter knew Janet on sight. He led us to a table where 3 men and 1 woman were already sitting. The men stood up as we approached. Janet introduced me to the men, and I shook hands with all of them, then nodded slightly towards the woman. One of the men pulled Janet's chair out and held it for her as we sat down. I gritted my teeth, wishing I had thought of doing it first. Once or twice I caught the woman's eyes on me, appraising me openly. She was in her early 30s and had sharp, keen features. Her eyes were a pale green that matched the flaming red hair she wore in a huge beehive. I wondered idly if it was really her hair or a dye job. Janet, dear, you're just going to have to tell me where you found this beautiful specimen of a man. Just look at him, she exclaimed as I blushed. He even blushes beautifully. The men around the table laughed. I put on my most charming smile, hoping it would cover up my embarrassment. You won't have to worry about Martha now, Mr. Jones. The young man, who'd been introduced as Ringo, said, If she likes you, she won't write anything nasty about you in her column. I stared closely at the blond young man they called Ringo. Something about his name had rung a bell in the back of my mind, but because of my nervousness, I couldn't put my finger on it. Don't worry about anything Ringo has to say, darling, she replied, patting my arm affectionately. He's probably still carrying a grudge over the loss of Janet. You already know, don't you, darling, that Janet and Ringo were engaged to take the big jump? She smiled brightly at everyone at the table, but I hadn't missed the bright glitter in her eyes as she told the old news. She watched for my reaction, but I was beginning to get on firm ground now. I was used to the sharp claws of malicious women. Yes, I replied cheerfully. Janet told me earlier that Mr. Ringo would be here. I have been aware of him, but I haven't had the opportunity to meet him until today. I glanced up at Janet and saw the relief in her eyes. After that, the conversation became more formal. They discussed the idea of having Janet and Ringo go on a 3-month tour of the West Coast after she completed her bookings in the East. I could tell from the look in Ringo's eye that he was all for the tour. He and Janet had the same agent, and the agent was all for the trip. It wasn't hard for my inexperienced mind to grasp what was behind the scheme. Ringo hadn't had a record in the top 100 in the past 2 years. With Janet drawing the crowd, they would be able to cash in on the rumors about their past romance, plus rebuild his image. Ringo was hungry. I watched his cold blue eyes search Janet's face. She kept her eyes away from him. She was up on what was going down. She glanced at me shyly. I shook my head, wanting her to know I didn't want her going for the deal at all. Martha caught my motion and smiled. "Mr. Jones, I believe you might have a surprise for a lot of people in this town." I grinned at her in return, staring into her eyes until she looked away. I wanted her to know that I was a man, and not some woman's play toy. I decided to put all my marbles in the pot at once. When a man has dealt with women all his life, he has a feeling about them that is seldom wrong. I knew that many women were slow to make a decision, but if you backed them in a corner, they would accept it. I decided to put Janet in a corner. I really didn't have that much to lose. Either she went for it, or I started to pimp everything that wore a skirt in New York.